say, see it in a whole new way. I'm sitting on top of the world, on top of the world, on top of the world.
Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Leaders and Learners, where we know that the best leaders are lifetime learners. And today I have someone that is quite intriguing to me. And I think you'll understand out of the box is absolutely a way to live. People always ask why this and why that. You know, Bob Dickinson, he's the author of this cool book. He says, it's not the answer to the question that might be the problem. You might be asking the wrong question. What is normal these days? Are we going back to normal? What is normal? Is normal even good? There's so many intriguing questions that he has asked and attempted to answer and help you find solutions to. You might be struggling with post COVID. Um, Hell, you might just be struggling with life. And the cool thing about having this author as a guest is he's going to help us plow through some of these things. And then we get to talk about how he even came to the decision to write this book because, thinking outside of the box and rebelling against what normalcy is, that might be something that you're not ready for. So let's find out. Are you ready or not? Let's welcome Mr. Bob Dickinson. Hi, how are you?
Hey, Tanya, how are you this afternoon?
I'm great. I'm excited to chat with you about this book that you have written, Me, Jesus, a Beer, and a Cigar. I mean, okay, the title in itself is like, oh my God. So I want you to talk to the audience, let them know a little bit about you and how we wound up getting this book, Me, Jesus, a book, and a cigar. Hello.
You got it. Well, my background is I've been in the sports, TV, entertainment industry my entire career. And in 2015, I started a small firm, started a foundation, and I decided that the platforms for both of those really kind of needed to focus very intentionally on diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's an article on my website, which is jeremiahjames.org, that's called Becoming Intentional. And I think that's real important because it traces kind of the path and the philosophy behind why we created this firm. And on there, you'll see me talk about a foundation that we created that today provides scholarships to women of color, and particularly in the automotive engineering space. We talk about mentoring marginalized men and women about career and life choices, which is something that I do through an organization called Partners in Change. We talk about tackling, projects like involvement with a film called The Games in Black and White. Was written by a friend and colleague of mine, George Herthler, who just happens to be the gentleman who authored 3 winning Olympic bids, including the one here in Atlanta where Andy Young and Billy Payne created a partnership, showed cooperation between Atlanta's black and white communities, which helped us secure the games here in Atlanta. I'm here in Atlanta. I work with the National Congress of American Indians toward changing the name of the Atlanta Braves to the Atlanta Brave, singular. Simply to reflect the courage and leadership, not only of our indigenous population, but those from the birthplace of the civil rights era, who really have changed the world. There's a project we're working on. It's a faith-based video about how taking a knee during the national anthem could be a way to really champion, the freedom that our Creator intended. And then I've got mentioned involvements in organizations like the One Race Ministry Movement and Bridging the Gap, which are all about facilitating racial reconciliation and change. And then there's the biggie, of course, the book, Me, Jesus, a Beer, and a Cigar. So some of this, that may come off as a little edgy to some people, some of your listeners, but that's really kind of what the intention is to write a faith-based book that is really pretty edgy in spots.
You champion a lot of things for people that don't look like you.
Mhm.
What is that about?
That's a great question. Yeah, I'm going to take us back to 2020. And we all kind of, none of us probably want to go back to 2020, but I'm going to take us back there anyway. And 2020 was about, pandemic, isolation, economic free fall, divisive presidential election, and racial upheaval since we had not seen like the 60s. Um, and I honestly, Tanya, I just kind of had to shut it down for a while. And I went to the back deck of this really cool craft brewery in my hometown, cigar and beer in hand. And I simply asked God to bring reason to an unreasonable world. And out of that quiet time and that contemplation came the book. In the book, I touch on topics like politics, religion, family, giving, spiritual, social awareness, sports, entertainment. Um, but it's really designed to take people's thoughts for everyday living and just turn that glass maybe a quarter turn and look at some of those topics just a little bit differently.
I appreciate the fact that you said it was too much. Like at some point, you needed to take a pause. Most of what was going on seemed to be very tumultuous, again, for people that don't look like you, right? So, because you are someone that can be open about this, if you were feeling that way, how do you think people were feeling that didn't look like you, that were dealing with a lot of this stuff firsthand? Or do you feel like everybody had a firsthand account of the too much at that time?
Well, I think everybody's had too much during that time. They just looked at it differently.
Mm.
And what I just the route that I decided to take, Tanya, I mean, the trigger was May 25, 2020, when George Floyd was murdered. We'd seen a lot of things leading up to that we questioned whether we'd really made that much progress in the last 50 years, but that was kind of the linchpin, pun intended, incidentally. Um, and I became very intentional about, if we're going to change this, I myself have got to get around people who don't look like me. So 3 weeks after the George Floyd murder, I joined a group of multicultural, faith-based people, about 15,000 of us, and we marched from Centennial Park in downtown Atlanta to the state capitol to protest a lot of the stuff that was going on. I'd never done that before. I sought out organizations, faith-based organizations that were really tuned into this. One Race movement was certainly one of them, but shortly thereafter, I learned of a group called Bridging the Gap. What Bridging the Gap was, Tanya, it was a group of Black and white men from churches right down the street from each other who had never talked to each other before. And they said, this is too much. We've got to figure out a way to solve some of these problems. And the only way we do it is to get together and talk and be willing to be uncomfortable and being the only person that looks like us in the room. And I don't mean necessarily the Black person walking into the white room, because he's done that all his life. I mean, white people like me being willing to go into a setting where we're the only white people in that room, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a meeting, whether it's a church, so that we can begin to understand better what that awful legacy has looked like, because the only way we can change things is if we understand.
What in your background gave you the gumption that you would be able to handle that? Like who are you? Where did you come from where you feel like you can do something that clearly not everyone that looks like you are capable of doing, or maybe they don't feel like they're capable of doing, but something about you personally in your past, maybe from your parents, that gave you enough self assurance that you would be okay putting yourself in these uncomfortable situations and, could make things better? Where did that come from?
I've always been relatively self-assured, but I think it really does start back with my parents. I was raised in an environment where my parents took me to church all the time. And one of my favorite songs you sing when you're a little kid is red and yellow, black and white, they're all equal in his sight. And that was just ingrained. And it seems so logical to me. Well, of course, everybody's equal. Why would anybody think, that you are better than another just because of the color of your skin? And then, when crazy things started, happening in the 60s, and as I started into my career, I saw things that were troubling. But you convince yourself that things are getting better, and you get a little bit complacent. And I think what happened starting around 2016, 2018, 2020, you can draw whatever parallels you want there. Divisiveness, just kind of took over. And I just felt like that just wasn't good enough for me anymore. I just couldn't stand by and not say anything. We need to be intentional. We need to be uncomfortable. We need not to be afraid of moving from advocate to activist. I mean, I was always an advocate for these things, Tanya. But it's easy to shake your head and say, yeah, I'm for these rights. I'm for women's rights. I'm for Black people's rights. I'm for gay people's rights. I'm for whatever. And it's easy to write the check sometimes even. But to speak out, you need to find a forum where you can speak out. And my initial forum was writing the book. We'll see kind of where that goes, but I really felt like I needed to write the book. I've always enjoyed writing. I was an English major in college. I tell people if I wasn't such a chicken thinking that I would starve as a starving artist, I would have probably made that my profession or my career. But I ended up down in the path of, sports and TV and entertainment administration. But it's been a good career, but it's now time to say I've had a good career and I've had a good life. And before the end of it, I need to try to make some change out there.
I can absolutely appreciate all that you are sharing. It almost feels, though, like you challenge religion a little bit. Am I picking up on the wrong thing, or do you challenge it in a way where there's just more perspective?
I don't challenge religion. I just think that there are Christians who need to turn the glass a quarter a turn because they're not seeing things quite clearly. And that's where I kind of start talking about, let's not get back to normal because normal isn't working. It didn't work. And I truly think that God tried to get our attention and still trying to get our attention by asking us to look at situations that, particularly the white evangelical church gets wrong.
Take me a little deeper into that. Tell me more. You want people to not continue to be normal, and getting those that are deeply embedded in church and Christianity to turn the corner a little bit. What does that look like?
It looks like a church that opens their arms to everybody. Martin Luther King was infamous for saying that the most segregated hour of the week was between 11 and 12 on Sunday morning. And there are an awful lot of predominantly white churches that have a very difficult time going anywhere but there. And if they do, generally there are one or two of the congregations who are the big givers who instruct the pastor to stay away from those topics. Otherwise, they're taking their money and going somewhere else. And therefore, things change slowly. I think in the urban areas is probably not as pronounced, but when you get into some of the rural areas, I believe there's still that mentality.
Absolutely. All right, viewers and listeners, I'm going to show you a little something that Bob is sharing with us today.
We were talking the other day, and we were talking about, pre-pandemic, and Bob says, everyone wants to get back to normal. The fact is, the normal that we knew is not necessarily the normal that we need. This man understands that. He truly does understand it. So without any further ado, I would like to bring up the man of the hour, the man who wrote a book entitled Me, Jesus, a Beer, and a Cigar. Put your hands together, please. Give him a warm welcome, Mr. Bob Dickinson.
The story starts in 2020, and we all kind of know what 2020 was like. Pandemic, isolation, economic freefall, divisive political climate, political unrest like we probably haven't seen since the 1960s. And so in May of 2020, I started to write a weekly blog. I said, I'm just going to write about thoughts for everyday living. I want to write about family, and I want to write about giving and politics and religion and social and spiritual awareness and sports and entertainment and things that I knew a lot about, or thought I knew a little about, at least had an opinion about. And then on May 25 of 2020, George Floyd was murdered. And that sent me back. And I just really kind of had to get away for a while. And I came back here to this back porch of this Curry. And I asked God to bring reason to an unreasonable world. And when you ask God questions, you need to be ready to answer, or ready to listen. And, one of the things that he shared with me, he said, there's a reason for a lot of this happening right now. He says, if you want to get back to normal, you're not asking the right questions, because normal wasn't working. It absolutely wasn't working. He wants us to show a little courage and think about how to take that glass that we look at, maybe turn it about a quarter a turn and go, my goodness, it's a little bit different. What I hope motivates more of us as we move forward and we move from being an advocate to an activist is an opportunity to change some things, because Lord knows normal sure isn't working for us. We need to encourage everybody to seek the abnormal.
Bob, let me tell you, one of the things that I enjoy doing is bringing people on that help enlighten and empower others. Your book is something, first of all, it was the title, I have to be honest. And then reading more about the book was something I felt that just about anyone that had struggled through that time could get something from, right? I want you to tell the listeners who this book is for, in your opinion, who it will help the most, and how you are continuing to spread your word.
Good question, and I appreciate good questions. When I first wrote the book, the first question you always get when somebody hears you've written a book, they say, well, what's it about? And I honestly couldn't answer that question without going into like a 12-minute answer. And when you come out of the media world and where everything you're taught is to talk in sound bites, I had a hard time coming up with a sound bite. So I finally just blurted, it's about life. Well, that opens a whole nother can of worms, because when you start talking about life, that's, a book the length of War and Peace. And I said, no, honestly, I said, whether you are a Christian, a non-Christian, a fence sitter, we take a look at real life situations and try to show how the gospel, how my faith has allowed me to work through all those situations and perhaps provide a little bit of hope for people who have been in those scenarios or have seen those scenarios and not seen them end very well. So that's a large part of what we're trying to accomplish. And we cover a wide gamut. And the beauty of the book, Tanya, is that, the chapters are short, as you know, 3 to 5 pages. It's an easy read. I have commentaries at the end of every section to give put it into perspective a little bit. But you can sit down and read, one chapter in 5 minutes, or you can sit there and, for 30 minutes and knock a couple out. But what I encourage people who read the book to do is to read the commentary, where you get a little bit of the background, a little bit more of the story, and some questions that, we really want you to kind of think about and see where it leads you.
What do you do? We don't start our show with who are you and what do you do? Because we want to know more about the story. Your story is so intriguing. How did you get here from what you do? What is that?
I think, sitting on that back deck for, day after day and just asking God a lot of questions. I just kind of, at one point in time, I just shut up and listened. And it's amazing, what you hear sometimes. And what I heard is, if you're going to fix things, you got to start with you. I gave you gifts. I gave you talents. Use them. Use them to fix things. Use them to change things. And I said, that may be a little uncomfortable sometimes, but nothing worthwhile happens if it's easy. This isn't easy. This is hard. We look at what happened in Buffalo a couple of days ago, and we just know how hard this is. The pain that those people are going up there is just unconscionable. And for what reason? Just because somebody didn't believe that Black people were worthy of living. We've got to change that. And I know not everybody feels like that, but the extremes seem to be getting extremer, and that populace seems to be getting larger, and they seem to be getting more of a voice. And we can't change that unless we have a deep enough faith and feeling and belief in ourselves and our Creator to know how that change has to take place. And if we just take the time to go to the gospel and show what the instructions are, it's a great instruction manual. It really is.
You've spent the majority of your career in what industry?
Sports, television, entertainment industry. I worked in
then-
college sports. I worked in professional sports. Done a couple of Olympics, motorsports. All of those types. I worked at a broadcast or large cable network at one time.
How did that prepare you to write a whole book? Because many people think I'm just going to write a book and it's so easy. But we all know, especially now that you've completed this task, that it's not. So did any of what you have experienced in your career kind of prep you for becoming an author?
Partially. I've always enjoyed a good story. I've always enjoyed writing a good story. But when you're in the industry that I come out of, you hear an awful lot of good stories. And you meet a lot of intriguing and interesting people. And you just sometimes want to say, gosh, that's a really interesting story. I'd like to be able to retell that. So a lot of, obviously, what I write out in the book, I draw on from many of my own experiences. I mean, particularly when you get to the section called Sports and Entertainment, I've got a story about playing in my backyard all by myself when I was a kid, because I lived out in the country and I didn't have any friends that lived nearby, and made my own baseball diamond. I pretended to be the heroes of that age, and Hank Aaron being one of those. And you grow up in the sports industry, and you're around a lot of people who don't look like you, because a lot of those people are really good athletes, and it just you don't see them as different. So maybe that was a good bit of what the groundwork was there.
I love that. So listen, y'all, can you see that? This thing is really weird. I need you guys to get this book. I can't see it. It's so
I got
weird.
one.
Oh, there we go. Yes, you show them. I want you to see it.
This one.
Yes. Jesus, a beer and a cigar. I want you to get the book. I want you to read it. I want you to let me know what you think about it. But more than that, Bob, let them know how they can continue to support you and follow your journey. Are you going to be doing any touring? Like, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, you can certainly follow me on our website, which is jeremiahjames.org. There are all sorts of tabs there that show what we're involved in, but I hope to obviously be doing more speaking. So anybody who's interested in having me come speak to their group, whether you're a church group, a community or civic organization, or actually one of the interesting targets, so we're targeting craft breweries and cigar bars to go in and spread our story a little bit. There is a Christian product expo coming up in Lexington in August, in which my book is going to be featured. And I'm eager to try to find some places to speak up and around the Lexington area. So if anybody is listening from Lexington and knows of a place or would like to bring me in and talk about my book and some of the ideas in it, I'm certainly approachable and easily reachable through the jeremiahjames.org website. But reach out to me on LinkedIn too. I mean, I love to see different backgrounds of people, and I always respond to my LinkedIn invitations. So that's a great way to do that as well.
Awesome. Well, we will be including all of his information in the captions of the podcast. So please make sure you tap in. His links will be there. Make sure you get the book, read the book, discuss the book. And if there's somewhere you think around you, that would be a great place to have him come talk. As you can see, he has stories, he has opportunities to connect. And, being in a group and discussing some of the ideas and subjects in the book, I think are amazing. It just feels different when you start to realize that what you are experiencing, others have experienced too. What you thought, others actually think the same thing, but you can't if you're doing it in isolation by yourself. So let's go ahead and get Bob out to where we are so that we can have these discussions and leave a little more enlightened, empowered, and educated about, some of these post-COVID situations and his stories. They're great stories. So Bob, I want to thank you so much. And definitely keep in touch. Know that we support you. We are fans of yours. And this book has been definitely a benefit to my book library. So I want to thank you so much for that.
Tanya, I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate the encouraging words.
Absolutely. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So listen, I'm serious about this. Tap into the book. Take some time, read through some of the stuff. It's interesting. It just gives you different perspective. And those are the things that help us grow mentally and physically. Those are the stories that help us, find perspective in some of our own lives and find opportunities for growth. Leaders and learners, we're here to be better leaders and learn new things that help us grow as people. So again, tap into Bob's book, Me, Jesus, a beer and a cigar. And if there is a cigar lounge, there's one here in LA in Gardena my cousin goes to all the time. I'm gonna have him give them a call, but I think it would make for, and I don't even smoke cigars, but I would go listen to Bob, read some of his stories and chat a little bit. I was gonna have him read some stuff, but I want you to read it. I want you to take the time to read some of his ideas, some of the thoughts, and just kind of ponder and see what you think. He's definitely open to conversation about this stuff. So, tap in. Information down below in the captions. And as usual, we will see you back here, same place, same time, coming up soon. All right, stick around, and we'll be talking to you soon. Bye.